And we're recording.
Okay. All right. So I think we're going to cover page 38, 39, and maybe we'll get to 40, which and I know we looked at some of this last week. I want to deal with group consciousness now and go through it almost sentence by sentence here to figure out what this really says. And have any of you guys looked at twin dimensions? Okay, because a certain amount of reading of that gives you a better understanding how we developed in the first place. So if you ever get a chance, at least even if you're going through the first few chapters, they're significant to our early development, which we, for the most part, obviously don't remember. So when it says, and of course, this is white magic, it's in the introductory remarks. This is section E, group consciousness, which is the consciousness of the great sum totals which arrived at by man through the development, first of all, of his individual consciousness. That's his little divine spark, right? The sum total of the lives of his animal, emotional, and mental nature. So let's figure out what that really says. So as we know, we have come up through the evolutionary process. Basically, on this planet, we've got the physical kingdom, which is kind of the dirt and the land, and we get to the second, we got the vegetable kingdom, then we get the animal kingdom. So all of that history that got even as far as the animal kingdom is within us. It is part of our group consciousness as a group and as an individual, if you will. If we're speaking about the individual consciousness, what you are carrying with you, plus the spark of divinity dwelling within the form which they make, which we know that becomes our individuality, like I said, the chip off the old block, and it goes forward. This is why it has taken so long for us to get this far, is because we are pushing upward. We are working ourselves upward, individually and collectively as humanity. And it's the same forces that you're working against when you want to go up onto the mental plane. And then you will be going and making, that's the big push, because when you do that third initiation, you then at that time make contacts with the spiritual triad. So that was part of the incredible push and battle that you fight to go upward to get there. But this is what you're pulling up with you. But these are also the forces that you're working against. That's why when he made a comment about man is the at-one-ment, in other words, we are the middle point. We are the one that brings what's up all the way from the bottom up to that Buddhic plane, which is plane number 4. It's the middle, and that's where we put the two together. We put animal man, which becomes human, then spiritual man together, but that's what we do. So the point being that the group consciousness of which each one of us comprises, or collectively humanities comprises, whichever way you want to look, is the sum total of arrived at by man through the development. First of all, this individual consciousness, then the sum total of the lives of his animal nature, the lives of your emotional nature, and the lives of your mental nature. All of that's heavy lifting. Any comments before we go any further? Oh, look at this silence. Donnie, I'm not hearing anything out of you.
I'm on mute. I'm
We know
packing
that.
up. I'm sorry. I've got to go check out here in just a couple minutes.
All right.
As far as heavy lifting goes, you told me it was like, you know, a coal miner with a big bucket of coal one time, you know, and it's got a long way to go to get up that mine to get all that coal out, and it's heavy. But once you do, the load gets lighter.
Okay. Do you know what the word paraphrasing is? Donnie?
No. Yes. Why?
Because anyway, you should hear the stories he tells me about what I say.
Do you not remember saying that?
Not in a million years would I say that.
Yeah, that was just like a week ago, Carla.
Yeah, right. Hey.
You were telling me. Yeah, that was
Oh
funny.
no, the other story was even more bizarre. What did you tell those people? Tell this group what you told those people the other day when you first met them.
Said, my mentor said, you know, our head is like the cauldron. These are the ingredients. We put it in, it gets stirred around, and then magic happens. And that's what we're doing, and that's what we're studying, and that's what's happening. And
I know, but yeah, you told them that's what I said.
Yeah, you did say that.
That's why I asked if you knew what paraphrasing was.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, they must have really thought that you needed them after you told them that. They're probably waiting there to save you.
I think there's not a lot of judgment going on around these parts right now. Everybody here is pretty much on the same path, you know.
Yeah, right. Well,
So.
Well, anyway, we won't go any further with that, but
Right.
Okay, so then after we've got the individual, that's what you're hauling up. Then comes the awareness of his group is specified for him in that group of disciples working under some master who represents to him the hierarchy. So the point is this early set you have to lift up to a point where you can make a connection with that hierarchy. And I would expect that to be at the third initiation, that you would make that connection, because by that time you connect with the spiritual triad. Prior to that, you're working your way through the physical plane, the astral plane, the lower mental. So when you've gotten through what the masters talk about as the first initiation, that would be when you would become aware of the group specified for you in that group of disciples working under some master who represents a hierarchy. And then you would be dealing with race structure as far as figuring out who and what. And the hierarchy might be defined as a sum total of those sons of men who are no longer centered in the individualized self-consciousness, but who have entered into a wider realization of that of the planetary life. And I keep coming back to this because in today's world, they want to force group consciousness, that you're all supposed to get along, so on and so forth, on those very lower levels where you're doing your experiments and experiencing and expressing on the physical and on the astral plane, which is not principled matter. That's where you practice. That's where you learn how to deal with this multidimensional world you're living in and coordinate it. So anyway, so when you get to a certain point and you no longer need a physical form, you got to go somewhere. And that's the realms that the hierarchy deals with, and the spiritual triad, just so you get a positioning here. There are stages in this realization mounting all the way from the tiny group recognition of the probationary disciple up to the completed group awareness of the life in whom all forms have their being, the consciousness of the planetary logos, that spirit before the throne, who manifests through the form of a planet as man manifests through his form in the human kingdom. So, like I said, there's always this push. Everybody, I mean, well, that's what communism is on one level. That's what I see groups of people who want to work on a project together try, and they're all supposed to be thinking the same thing or doing the same thing. It doesn't work that way. Everybody's got their individuality, and at those early stages, they're just supposed to be working to figure it out and experimenting with what's going on here. So forcing it too soon is all you end up with is ultimately a stalemate. You can apply it for a while. I mean, Russia had what, 1917 to 1990, somewhere in there before it broke. But it's just a structure that's not meant to occur in the early stages, and it becomes the natural structure when you move up into these higher realms where there is more transparency, because literally if the veils are starting to be taken off each time you move a little bit further up the line. In fact, I think if I go to Annie Besant, let's see, we've got, I think she talks, well, of course, everybody's got a different book, but when she talks about the multiplication within the one by the action of the will marks the place of origin, the first logos on our chart, our top chart, the undivided Lord, the eternal Father. These are the sparks of the supreme fire, the divine fragments, generally monads, named generally monads. A monad is a fragment of the divine life separated off as an individual entity by the rarest film of matter. Matter so rare that while it gives a separate form to each, it offers no obstacle to free intercommunication of a life, thus encased with the surrounding similar lives. So that's where you have no obstacle. I mean, that group functions as a unit and understands and communicates without any real obstruction. So as we go down the planes and we get a veil on, by the time we get to the bottom of that chart on 117, we have 7 veils. So when we use the word dense, then we understand what's happening. And I mean, like I said, talk to a rock and see how well you can communicate versus talk to another human being, where we're living with a lot less in the veil department of obstruction of communication. So what are you thinking, Tom?
I've got nothing right now.
Are you sure? There's something in there.
So you said these veils get stripped away the higher up we go. So
Each
is it just
initiation eliminates one of those. In other words, you've got at each initiation, starting with the number 7, that's the first initiation. In other words, you now on that plane with those 7 sub-levels, you do not have anything obstructing you from interacting with every level of vibration. She uses the word vibration in here, that it can be sounded on that plane. You have them all. Okay, so they've been impressed on your consciousness, which means that if it sounds, you can give the equal sound back because you
Okay.
have it.
so it's
All
like
right.
the door for each one of those is kind of opened up for you and you can just keep moving
Yeah, and then
forward? Okay.
you go to the second initiation, if you will, which means that on the astral plane, all of the possibilities, all of the vibrations that are on there, you now have that. And the significance and importance is because if something gets sounded on that plane and you do not have the matching other side of the symmetry, then you will be drawn back to it, which means you do not have full control of that plane
Got it.
until
Okay.
you match all.
Okay.
And then there's communication there. You still have a separativeness. Now you're moving up onto the mental plane. But once you start moving into that spiritual triad, where you're formless, where you don't need the form, you know, your matter is, like she talks about, the finest point of matter here that doesn't obstruct up at the very top. And so that's part of the problem of drawing yourself up. It's part of the problem of your communication with other people, because you're not all working on the same level and plane down. Well, look on a playground.
Right.
You know? So
you can kind of you can see elements of that just in life, and you kind of hone in on that. Then if you're working in a group and you're all kind of, it's just chaos, well, it's just because everybody's in a different place.
yeah,
trying to work on the same thing, but
then throw the charts in there, throw the individual chart and the agenda and the transits of that particular individual. In other words, his agenda for this lifetime is to do da 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 da, and he needs to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
Period. And it may not have anything to do with the guy sitting next to him at a desk at school or at work or whatever. Right. So there needs to be freedom of interplay in the life, the freedom to be able to communicate, and to say and do what you need. That's what people need on this planet, is they they have to have that freedom. You take that freedom away, and what happens to your agenda, your lifetime, your what you were meant to do. If you've got no way to interact and to communicate or to speak what's going on in your mind. So
that really, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No.
Well, I was just going to say that just hearing that, and now it's really starting to click for me. It just makes me question a lot, like sending kids to public school, because they're forced to learn the same thing the same way. But what we're learning here is that that's just impossible. Not everybody can learn everything the same way, and everybody's got to kind of progress through whatever it is that they're doing at their pace and in their way to get to the same end result, maybe, but it just might be a different path to get there. And by kind of like boxing people into a corner to look at everything the same way and learn everything the same way and do everything the same way is just kind of limiting everybody from actually doing this real type of growth that we should be focusing in on, or at least progressing on the path the way that they should be, or the way that they want to. So it just kind of enlightens me to that point. It's just like, and especially as a manager, I mean, I'm a manager of people at work, and I have to make sure that they're doing things a certain way because this is what the law says. But now I'm like, this doesn't make any sense because person A might not do things the same way person B does, but as long as they get to the same end point, does it really matter?
Well, in your work, you're the one who's going to have to answer that, because you want a uniform result, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But let's go back to education for a moment. When education was chosen here in the United States, I think probably the 1920s or something like that, there was a choice between, I believe we have the Dewey system now, and Maria Montessori. And Montessori has a system where you get didactic learning. The information and the pieces you work with have their own set of communication to you of, an example would be what they call the pink tower, which it's got 10 cubes. Each is what represents, size wise, they just go right up, and you can see that the mathematical relationships and proportions, and you learn all of that just by doing this and having a sense of order. Well, first of all, it was easier to set them all at a desk and give them the same thing. That was more functional a choice at that point in time, because with Montessori, the teacher is going to be working with each one of them to some extent individually to get them going on whatever they're going to do. So they need more space. And Maria Montessori had a child out of wedlock. So that was a big score against her teaching system when it came to choice here, because of course we had, the religious background in choices. But and then in the 60s, those choices surfaced again. They had Summerhill, they had various schools, and actually I think Steiner has a school that is very innovative for the students, so on and so forth. But we're dealing with volumes of people, so there's a balance in there that has to be met somehow, if possible. But even so, I mean, we're dealing with volumes of people. I'm sure that in some respects, in some parts of the world where you're dealing with a lot less, children have a little bit more innovative ability. But yeah, but the point is, you cannot take away the freedom of speech, and you cannot take away the freedom of movement and some choice. Probably part of our problem now more is we have a world that's the opposite of what Donnie just talked about in his experience with his conference, where everybody was open, everybody was communicating, they were sharing back and forth, they were not critical, they were all happy to be there. And that is the foundation of what's supposed to happen on this planet. In fact, I'm going to try to get to that a little bit when I talk a little bit about a comment you made last week, in fact, about doing something good and, or kindness to somebody, and how it affects them, but it affects you in a positive way. And because that is the sharing, and I want to use their exact words, so we're going to come back to it. There's quotes on, but we're meant to exchange. That creation of consciousness, which is what we do all the time, okay, was meant for interaction. And that's the growth of the planet. It's the growth of us, but it's the growth of the planet. That's the design of this planet, what it's meant to do. We, for the most part, aren't quite there yet. And in fact, we have some very strong efforts right now to not have that happen.
Yeah, I was going to say, it almost feels like we're regressing further in the opposite direction in some instances, because I feel like, and I see it at work too, where you have people that probably have really, really good ideas and they just feel closed out and just like would rather just stand back in the shadows and not say anything because they're too worried that their idea might sound stupid or something like that. And so they're not practicing and exhibiting that kind of freedom of speech and freedom of choice and freedom to put themselves out there and feel confident that they can go ahead and do that without really kind of being shunned and beat down, because that seems to be what happens a lot these days, is people will say something and it might be a really good idea or might make a very valid point, but it goes against the grain of somebody else's narrative and they just beat them down into submission, and the person's just like, all right, well, I'm just not going to say anything anymore, type of thing. So it almost seems to me that we're kind of regressing in the opposite direction in some instances. So it's good to be talking about this because more people need to hear stuff like this.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a deliberate intent to have those things occur because it slows growth and development and slows evolution of mankind.
Absolutely.
Puts them in a box.
Absolutely.
Box Donnie was talking about. Remember, Donnie said he was in the box. So
yeah, they put us. Tom knows exactly about that too, and so does Bull and yep.
Mike.
Mike. Yep.
Mike's here.
Somebody.
Bull's not. Yeah.
Is Melinda on too?
Melinda, Melissa, and Mike, and you and me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, where am I? Okay, there's Melissa. I haven't heard a thing out of Melissa yet today.
I'm here. I was actually nodding my head as Tom was talking because
I
he
could
and I
sense
work,
that.
you know, in similar circumstances, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's like widespread. It's just preposterous to me that we're doing stuff like that. It's like we need to move forward, and it's just so evident to me that everyone should be trying to push forward.
Well,
but we just sit stagnant.
What's funny is that because I work for the courts, state courts. So we've been pushing for, like remote work and all that other stuff for years. People have been bringing this up and they're like, no, we're not, and we're probably the slowest to evolve as an organization, so to speak. Sometimes I feel, but once the pandemic hit, we were forced to do exactly what everyone was asking for. And for New Jersey, we did it successfully. And so they were trying to backtrack, and people were like, wait a minute, you told us we're being successful. Why are you trying to backtrack on this and not let us move forward and grow? And it's the same thing. And specifically having my office within HR, I do see exactly what you're talking about, Tom. Some people have great ideas and they're kind of pushed down or pushed out of the way. And it's really sad because they really do have good ideas. And then people just don't want to speak up because they're like, nope, we're not going to be listened to anyway. So why bother?
Sad.
Yeah, it is. And because people do have really good ideas, or people take their ideas who are at a higher level in the organization and be like, yes, and then they present it and put their name on it instead. Yeah, I've seen that a lot in my 20 years in the system here. But
Likewise.
Yeah, but even the learning process as well, as because I do training at work. We do our best to develop our soft skills training, more where we look at the many different types of learners and kind of incorporate everything into it, hoping everybody gets a little bit of something out of it. But when it comes to like what you have to learn for your job and be able to do to be considered productive, it's kind of like, here, here, either you're going to read it or you're going to listen to what I say, and that's it. And that's not how everybody learns. So I feel even with this type of material as well, you got to find the best way of how it clicks for you.
Mhm.
So some people can probably read this material and get it to an extent. Like for someone like me, I don't know if anyone else in the group is the same, being on these calls and being able to interact and have somebody else go through it alongside the reading is more helpful to me, because I need the interaction of people to figure it out and see how other people see things, as opposed to just assuming what I'm thinking is exactly what is being presented, when I could be just from my own personal experience, taking it under what my experience has taught me versus what your experience or Carla's or Melinda's or Donnie's experiences have them to understand the material. So talking in a group is different.
Can I
Yep.
interrupt for a minute? Because I just
course.
lost the power here. So if you lose
Oh.
me, you keep going until my power kicks back in.
Okay.
I'm on a battery backup right now. Okay, so keep going.
Okay. But yeah, like in training, there's it's the VARK system, VARK. Some people are visual, some people are auditory, some can read, and others are kinesthetic. So those 4 things, if you have someone who's very visual, but they're like, let's use like books on tape, or whatever, audio books on tape like that exist, like Audible. So they can listen. I can never like drive to work and listen to a book and take anything in. Like
Mhm.
I have to have it in my hand. I have to read it. And there are other people who are the opposite. So it's just knowing how people learn. And that might help Tom as a manager, knowing how they learn, or knowing like what connects with them.
Yeah.
Can get everybody on the same page. It's a different way of getting on that page.
Yep.
And for me, even with this, once you find that person, when Carla's talking about, when you hit that plane, you have different vibrations and energies. I feel that way with people.
Mhm.
Like sometimes you can have a conversation about what we're talking about with each other, because we might all be at that same level and we're all getting that same vibration, that same energy, and we're all willing. But if we have this conversation with somebody else and they look at us like we're crazy, you're like, all right, they're not there yet.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
not going to be the one who gets them there yet, because they're not at
Right.
a part in their life where they're open to receiving that energy just yet. So
Right.
that right now, that's what I'm getting out of this.
Yeah.
But when you correlate it to work, absolutely, because not everybody's in that same space.
Yeah. And you might be able to get those people there, like and it goes back to what you were saying, Melissa. It's how the manager kind of tailor fits
Right.
their approach to each employee, and that's what I try to do. But my only concern and quip with that is that I try to do that, but there's so many rules and regulations that disallow me from doing certain things a certain way. It's like I can't even put my own creative touch to how I manage people, because the government tells me how to do it. And I'm like, but I don't do some things the way that they tell me to do it. Like, that's not how I function. I'm more productive if you let me do it this way.
Mhm.
But there's so much freaking red tape to cut through. It's like pulling teeth.
Exactly. Yep. Especially because we're both in government. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
that's the toughest nut to crack.
Right. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
how you doing, Carla? You back up?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
I can see you too. You're moving around. That's a good sign.
Yeah, I'm checking the sign for the green light just came on for internet again. So we'll see.
Okay.
Things have a way of power has a way of coming and going around here.
So,
Anyway.
Melissa, we talk about this, and there should be a manager's manual out there that's kind of built foundational on some of this information that we're learning.
You would well, I mean, there's the information is
maybe
out
there
there.
is.
There's management. We actually have like a management leadership. Like you have to take it. It's like 6 days, but again, you can bring the horse to water.
Or will they drink it?
Exactly. And there's so many different managerial styles, and you're not. Well, I don't know about you. I mean, like for us, like you're not told which managerial style to go to. It's kind of like personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
But you do see that everyone kind of goes to another way. Like they're like, oh, I get it. And then they go on and they start supervising. You're like, all right, I thought you said you got it. But to me, it's the same with just anything in life. It's just that if you're not open to the new stuff coming in, you are going to be stuck in the same place.
Right.
So until you're open and willing to ask, to me, it's always like ask questions. If you're willing to ask questions and open up the door to conversation, more people, I think, will get. So like if you're talking to somebody who's not at that place as you are in that same space, if they're willing to even ask just like one question, you're like, okay, maybe they are starting to be ready to move up vibrationally, energy, that that kind of way, or whatever it is the topic would be. But that's how I see it. You just kind of have to gauge who's ready to have that conversation. It gets frustrating. It does get frustrating when you're trying to make changes or improvements, or just when you see something other people don't see just yet. It does get frustrating though.
And this is probably the same, even this is applied, you're applying it to work. This is applied to life and human interactions exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Well, even there.
And parenting and parenting too.
It's everything. And you see it everywhere. Everything we're talking about, Melissa, you see it outside of the workplace too. There's like people feeling repressed and not able to really talk about what they want to talk about, just because there's so much opposition and friction in the world today. It's just people can't be people. People can't be who they are because there's just so much strife. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. But there's frustration because the communication, because if you're not in that same space, the communication kind of gets jumbled. It's almost as if you're speaking different languages and you can't find that answer. Okay, go ahead, Melinda. Okay.
Oh, bye, Melinda. Take care. Safe travels.
Thanks.
All right. Next week.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, Mike. Am I seeing Mike?
Mike's dropped off a few times. I wonder if he just has a bad line. And I think Donnie's probably going to have to drop soon too.
Yeah, he said he was.
Yeah.
I know I saw that.
Yeah, Mike might pop back in. I've noticed he's dropped off and come back a few times. So he just might be dealing with bad reception.
I've had to come in through my phone. We lost power for a little bit on Wednesday, and then ever since then our internet has not been working correct. Like I'm on my phone. I can't even get I can't even use my computer right now. So I think, I don't know. There's solar flares happening, Carla. That's all I know. A lot of solar flares that are talking about it, and that they said.
Oh, they've turned this direction again.
Oh yes, they said, and they're just saying expect a lot of
disruptions.
Yeah, a lot of that going on. I think it started like a few days ago. So when we lost the power and internet wasn't working, I'm like, oh, there you go, right on schedule.
And that is on schedule. That it's amazing how accurate the timing is on stuff, but it is. Let me go through just a little bit more of this introductory remark, and then I'm going to jump to another subject. So we're now looking, we've got the man, he's got group consciousness, because it naturally and organically happens. And that's the point that I'm trying to make, is you don't have to go force all of everybody to be the same on the early part of the journey. It just naturally happens as this whole evolutionary pattern works its way out. So we got through the individual. Now the soul, therefore, may be regarded as the unified sentiency and relative awareness of that which lies back of the form of a planet and of a solar system. Well, why would we say that, except that on the individual level, the soul collects all of the experiences and the vibrations of the individual and keeps them through the whole evolutionary pattern until you get up to a point where it transfers over to the individual, because its consciousness now is such that it's been built to the level where it's stable. It's not going to zero out again. Okay. Where we don't have it, we plug in and we plug out. You know, we've got consciousness when we're awake, and we need to take a rest. And then we wake up and we do some more. But the life form that we are and are becoming is not strong enough for continuing consciousness until we get up to a certain point on that chart. So the soul is the one that collects all of our lifetimes and keeps it all together. That is the unified sentiency. And it does get synthesized because, again, so we use the word meaning. You know, you'll say, what does this mean? What does that mean? More often than not, you're coming back and you're comparing whatever that moment in front of you that you're experiencing is in relation to everything you've ever experienced. And that's where you determine the meaning. I see you, Tom, looking at this, thinking. What are you thinking?
I'm not. I'm just trying to soak it all in. Don't let the look confuse you. I'm trying to understand right now. Maybe I need more coffee. I don't know.
So we do continually incarnate, right? And we have experiences, and the soul is the one that keeps a collection of everything that we've experienced lifetime after lifetime, because it's becoming a it's becoming a life, if you will. And all of those experiences get synthesized together to calculate what we are. But you can go back on a subtler level, I think, and you have something going on today and you want to know the meaning of it. Or should I do this? Is this right or wrong or whatever? Be it your conscience, whatever, however you want to look at it, it gets evaluated against your whole history to say, okay, what does this mean? And somewhere along the line in your life pattern that's collective, you may have an experience similar to it, or something that triggers it, they evaluate. So, I mean, when you look for meaning, that's where you're looking. As long as you got a soul, you can evaluate what something means. And by that, what I mean is that when the time comes that the consciousness has been transferred over to the individual, And you've got that as full consciousness on your own now. You don't need the repository of the soul anymore. And that's up initiations that are a little higher. And then I think we had talked about this a little earlier. He will talk about in raised initiations. You are no longer looking for meaning because you got nothing to balance it against. You're up in the spiritual triad, which is in the formless world. Then he says you look for something that appears significant. Okay, but you will not be able to determine whatever that might be against meaning of the lower three worlds, which is what the soul took care of. Does that make it a little clearer? Okay. So when he talks about the soul being the unified sentiency and relative awareness of what lies back of the form of a planet or a solar system, if we come back to the earlier part of this paragraph, you have lived through all of those stages of the that which lies back of the form of a planet or a solar system. It's within you. You lived it. You have records of that as long as you're functioning with the soul. And so does every other human being out there who's got that. It says these latter are the sum total of all the forms, organic or inorganic, as the materialist differentiates them. The soul, though constituting one great total, is however limited in expression by nature and the quality of the form in which it's found. And there are consequently forms which are highly responsive to and expressive of the soul, others which, owing to their density, okay, and the quality of the atoms of which they are composed, are incapable of recognizing the higher aspects of the soul, or of expressing more than its lower vibration, tone, or color. The infinitely small is recognized, the infinitely vast is assumed, but it remains as yet a concept until such time as the consciousness of man is inclusive as well as exclusive. Interesting statement, huh? How can you be both?
I have no idea.
Okay. Melissa?
I don't need to be the only one
Oh.
to answer. Yeah.
No.
Being both inclusive and exclusive. To me, it's just the exclusivity is maybe, I don't know, maybe just on the human level and the spiritual level, depending on your level, that's where the exclusivity hits. The inclusivity to me is it's there for everyone, but it only becomes exclusive based on where you are at that time. I don't know. That's how I see it. I don't know.
Okay, or let's look at it from this viewpoint. The sentence he talked about just a little bit earlier than that is, depending upon how many levels that you function consciously on. I mean, the ones that you're not functioning on consciously, you cannot yet, are excluded in terms of the moment. In other words, whatever your given moment is, I mean, moments can be years, they can be lifetimes, where you can't pick up the information because you're not developed enough to be able to tune into those levels. Okay. So that's also a way of being exclusive. They're excluded, but just simply because you can't receive them yet. I mean, that's another way of looking at that. And that's why he talks about being highly responsive, expressive of the soul, and others, owing to their density, can't pick up those vibrations yet. So those are excluded for that person.
But they're out there
So
to be picked
yeah, they're
up.
out
They
there.
just
They just haven't
not
grown to a
ready
point.
for it yet.
Yeah.
Okay, that helps.
Yeah, and so that's why
So
the
that's what makes
infinitely
it
small.
inclusive, right? So that's what makes it inclusive. They're out there. You're
No,
just not.
just the reverse. They're
Okay.
excluded from their system, where the infinitely small is recognized, the infinitely vast is assumed, but it remains as yet a concept. Such time as the consciousness of man is inclusive as well as exclusive. So it will remain a concept until his consciousness can pick it up. Then it will be inclusive to him also, as well as exclusive. So it's where you are and what you can pick up and what you can't. Some is included, some is excluded. It becomes inclusive when you can recognize it, which means you're now on whatever that level is, and you can learn to read the information that's in the energy that's on whatever the given level is. Otherwise, it just goes right by you, kind of thing. We see that. Okay. That information for them yet is still excluded. And they don't get it. That's another statement. They don't get this or they don't get that. They can't see it. That's another way of putting it. But the point is they're excluded from that realm because they just aren't there yet, where you can see it or you can pick it up or you can figure it out, or so.
And the inclusive, the inclusive will be encompassing everything that you've been able to attain in this and every previous lifetime. Is that right?
Yeah, and you're conscious of it.
Yeah.
This concept will be understood when the second aspect is contacted and men understand the nature of the soul. It must be also remembered that just as the basic triplicity of manifestation works out symbolically in man as his quota of energy, his nervous system, and the body mass, so the soul can be known as a triplicity, the higher correspondence of the lower. So, you've got young souls, you've got old souls. And, and so even like when I get charts of twins, okay, you might have one who is an old soul and the other one is a young soul. And so you can give them the same basic pattern to work out, although there are subtleties when you get into the deeper relationships of those patterns. But the point is, one will do the old soul who's got a more understanding of the worlds and the dimensions he lives in, may very well do something different, quite different, in his application of the opportunities and his transits and his developmental stuff, because he's got a wider range within himself to draw from as options. And a young soul who hasn't been around the block that many times, so to speak, just isn't gonna be able to even come up with. And if you wanted to classify it with music, somebody who's had no music background in their history versus a Mozart. Okay, you could give them the same chart, but you're going to get two very different lifestyles and applications. So, and you can see that then, if you want, in terms of the words inclusive and exclusive. So now we're going to deal with a little bit of probably a small portion of this page, and then I'm going to move to something else. There is, first of all, what may be called the spiritual will, that quota of the universal will which any one soul can express, and which is adequate for the purpose of enabling the spiritual man to cooperate in the plan and purpose of the great life in which he is being. There is also the second soul quality, which is spiritual love, the quality of group consciousness, of inclusiveness, of mediatorship, of attraction or unification. This paramount soul characteristic, for only the soul has it as the dynamic factor. Okay, we are talking about spiritual love, but we are talking, and the quality of group consciousness, inclusiveness. When he says, for only the soul has this as the dynamic factor, can you figure out why they made that sentence? So I think we lost Donnie, right? I think he's gone.
He's still on the call.
I still see him on the call.
I know he sent a text though, said he was
Yeah.
going somewhere.
He's just muting. That's fine. Sometimes he
Okay.
forgets to hang up. He and I were talking to each other the other night, and he was prepping me to run this for you today, Carla. So he was showing me what to do on Zoom, and we were looking at each other on Zoom, but talking to each other on the phone. And then we went through we went through this, and then we just chatted up for like 3 hours. And then we just shut off Zoom and realized 5 minutes later we were both still on the phone.
Okay, so this spiritual love, the quality of group consciousness or inclusiveness, mediatorship, attraction, and unification. This is the paramount soul characteristic. Only the soul has this as a dynamic factor. And part of what we covered just a little is, I mean, this is what we're creating. This spiritual love is what we are creating in this solar system that we're in. I mean, and we got a long ways to go in this solar system. It's the second system. It starts at the bottom and it builds itself all, well, actually it came down, then we're going back up, but it's going to have a full round robin of from top to bottom, back up to top for this major solar system. But this is the one that is creating consciousness. But the consciousness, which is the union of spirit and matter, is the love. That is the action of love.
The unification of spirit and matter.
Right, because what do? We produce a third factor, which is the relation between the two. That's what holds them together.
So
That's really the picture, and that's why I'm trying to keep bringing this back till you kind of.
Is that what they mean when I hear a lot of reference to like law of attraction? Is that kind of what we're getting at with that? The unity between spirit and matter and love, I guess, or maybe not, because I hear law of attraction referenced in a whole bunch of different ways, but at its core, it sounds like to me that's kind of like what that is. Maybe
All of that, yeah, that's certainly one of the factors. Okay, but not just the law of attraction, although there's a certain degree of intelligence. If you go to chemistry, those elements know where they want to go.
Yeah.
There's an innate intelligence there.
Magnetism,
the
right.
law of attraction that human beings use has not necessarily got that much intelligence connected to it sometimes.
It has something.
Well, I think with the law, because what is it? I think there's like 12 laws or 7 laws, something like that. I think I have something, Tom, somewhere. And Carla, I think I like screenshotted it off of something I had. But I think with the law of attraction is kind of one of those, if you put the energy out there, you're attracting likewise energy.
Mhm.
Or, you know, it's kind of like if you think it and you want it, you can manifest it.
So
That's
that's
kind
what
of
I've
what-
heard before too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what the law of attraction is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Okay, well,
versus what
there's
Carla's talking
prob-
about.
yeah, there's probably a lot of different versions. But ask and you shall receive is the same thing as what you just said, by the way. I mean,
Exactly. Because I read that book, The Law of Attraction, many years ago. And that's pretty much right in that first paragraph is ask and you shall receive. Yeah.
Interesting.
right. But this whole system, this whole second system is putting those two together, no matter what it is, whether it's it's just that union, it's that binding, because it creates that relationship, which then holds them together.
Mhm.
But when I say it holds them together, it's also creating this entire second solar system, the second round of it. And this is really a very, very large idea, which we're just going to keep coming back to, because everything we're doing, I mean, the world we create, we're literally creating it. If you ever get into the physics of consciousness, you will understand that that's what we're doing. This is what our machinery is for. And right down to the synapses and our nervous system. And he can tell you how it all works to create this consciousness. But our second solar system is creating that. The spirit or monad is the primarily the expression of will, with love and intelligence as secondary principles. Love and intelligence are the secondary ones. The expression of will is ultimately the monad, and it's the driver no matter what. But I'm not going to get into some of this other all that other material right now. I don't think I want to go back to the subject of good for a little while. The personality is paramountly distinguished by intelligence, but the soul has the outstanding quality of love, which demonstrates as wisdom. Also, when the intelligence of the body nature is fused with the love of the soul. So, but that's where I want to leave white magic for the moment. Anybody got any final questions? And this also, I mean, we're dealing with electricity. You know, it's that fundamental thing they can't figure out kind of how that happens. I don't know if they figured it out yet. They didn't used to be able to know. But the real driver still underneath all of this is that monad. So I'm going to go to Annie Besant for a moment. I'm on page 8 the pages are always different. The logos, we're now at the very beginning, not yet a first because there is no second. This is at the very top of the chart when we're just starting out. It is seen as a point irradiating a sphere of matter drawn around him as the field for the future universe, flashing out with unimaginable splendor, a true mountain of light as the Manu has it, but light invisible save on the spiritual planes. So a lot of times earlier, I used to go to a group where there were a lot of people and they worked very diligently with this material. And I remember there were times when people will talk about the black light. There's a certain stage at which you will see black light. And the only thing I can say about it is, it's there because in a sense it is luminous. There's no way to describe it other than it appears luminous, but it is black light. Okay. And that's one of the stages that as you move up, you will see this. And it's just like he's talking about here. There's light, but it's invisible except on the spiritual planes. The great sphere has been spoken of as primary substance. It is the self-conditioned logos, inseparable at every point with the matter he's appropriated for his universe. Ere he draws himself a little apart from it in the second manifestation, it is the sphere of self-conditioning, the will, which is to lead to the creative activity. I am this when the not self is cognized, the point speaking symbolically in order to make the suggestion of form as seen from the side of the appearances vibrates between the center of a circle and the circumference, thus making the line which marks the drawing apart of spirit and matter, rendering the cognition possible, thus generating the form for the second aspect, the being we call the second logos, symbolically the line or the diameter of the circle. Plane, my son, this day got me. This relation of father and son within the unity of the divine existence of the first eye belongs to the manifestation, the life period of a universe. She's talking about the very beginning of a universe here. This is begetting of the sun, this appearance of the second logos, the wisdom, which is marked in the world of form by differentiation, the drawing apart of spirit and matter, the two poles between which is spun the web of a universe. The separation, as it were, of the neutral inactive electricity, which may symbolize the first logos, into the dual form of positive and negative, symbolizing the second, thus making the unmanifest manifest. That is, says the first logos vividly imagined for us in the preparation for the cell multiplication that we see on the physical plane. So this is that lead up to the appearance of a dividing wall, thereby the one cell becomes two. That's the very beginning of the system, but what the driver is here is always that monadic energy, that will energy. It is for the most part held in abeyance in our system now. Even though it's there and it's really the driver of it, it's not in full expression. That will come in the third system, which is a long time from now. So, and then you've got that monad makes that circle with the, that is a fragment of the divine life separated off as an individual entity by the rarest film of matter so rare that it gives a separate form to each, but offers no obstacle to free intercommunication of a life thus encased in the surrounding similar lives. And we have to kind of assume those guys are all happy campers because they haven't gotten down to the level where there's so much individuality and differentiation that they do battle like we do down here. That's the very top, and they truly are inclusive because they're not rejecting. At that level, there's not a rejection of anything. We get that when we get down here. And by the way, just talking about that, obviously I do charts, the astrology charts, everybody knows that who's here, but I can sit and look at two charts and compare them, and I know exactly how well they're going to get along. I can see where the chronic problems are going to come in long term, you know, and whether things can be worked out over time if there's differences, because there's enough flow that's going to allow or not. So, you know, when it coming along, so on and so forth, and the interactions that work, they're pretty apparent even here. So just so you know, I mean, that's all there in charts also. So, which is, you have an idea.
So Carla, in doing the charts,
Uh-huh.
you're able to kind of see how far within the planes a person can go in this carnation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, explain that a little differently. How far and what?
Like in this, okay,
what-
so let's say in this, like in this lifetime, right? Because of my chart, I will only
Mhm.
get, I would only get like so far within moving up the planes. Is that
Okay, all right. So, well, first of all, the chart doesn't tell you what stage of evolution you were at in the first place, by the way.
okay? Okay.
Okay, but what it can do is it can show you when there may be some opportunities for transformation. Okay. Which, yeah, that would be the best way to put it, but it does
Okay.
not determine your soul level or anything. It's the personality, it's defining the personality you're going to be using in this lifetime, and then the opportunities that pattern is going to have with those transits.
Okay.
Yeah. If that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense, because I asked that mainly because you know how as you see different generations of people and you see, you know, they'll talk about, oh, how this generation is more evolved than like 2-3 generations ago, or, you know, little things like, you know what, these little kids come in and yeah, my nephew, my daughter knew how to like use their thumb to swipe on the phone before they were even 2 years old. And, you know, it's almost like instinctual things that you notice with some people at younger ages that maybe it may have taken the other people longer to get there. So that's why I'm saying, like, is it within your chart where you know what level a person has come in with? So you debunk that.
Yeah, but by the same token, generationally, with the outer planet, you see, we've seen some very large changes in the generational patterns and groups and their relationships to each other, the outer planets, which you see within the chaos within the kids when they're born, or the brilliance with the kids when they're born, and so on and so forth. Because we've taken some steps up in as much as the outer planets have been in the ending of a cycle signs, if you will. So that really brought in some levels of awareness, I think, that we were not used to seeing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
In what I'm saying. Yeah, so a lot of them are a lot brighter. They appear to be brighter. And then a lot of them are just having a hard time coming down this far and functioning. Also. So, you know, they're very bright, but it's hard to ground here for them. Doesn't make much sense. They're functioning on some other levels that process differently. And we're seeing some of that too. And then we're just seeing some chaos with some of them. The relationships to some of these outer planets right now are in chaos, and they are doing battle with themselves. And if these kids are born when these things are really in chaos, you see it within them, you know. And things will mellow out again a little. It won't be too long before they should be starting to mellow out again a little bit, because these outer planets are now coming back into the more well-established human patterns, the more basic patterns we have, not our levels of unique sophistication that we're only supposed to get a little douse of on an individual basis. And there's been some real heavy duty hits for kids.
So Carla, would it be safe to say then, or maybe not, but like children who are classified as having learning disabilities and things like that, might they just be operating at a higher spiritual plane and just not really able to kind of synthesize how things are done and looked at through like the physical lens down here, if that makes any sense? Because I've often wondered about that.
Yeah, some of them, yes. Okay. Others of them are just caught in the chaos war.
Okay.
Of some of those outer ones that are, they've got ideas, but those ideas are not going to blend anytime soon in our planetary history. Okay, because we're dealing with the planets in our solar system. You know, in other words, when the chart's done, it's with those. And some of them are it's going to be a real long haul. And every so often, people who incarnate are going to be in that haul, just because that's the program, and they'll be working some of that out, and slowly, very slowly, you know, it'll all mellow somewhere along the line by the end of this second solar system, which is way beyond any number I could ever think of. You know, so no time soon, let's put it that way. But and out of that you will get, because you've got all the other planets to relate to them too. Out of that, you're going to get some uniqueness that's extremely constructive, but you're going to get a number of kids who are just embodying this chaos that they can't balance out, you know, and we see it. So
I think that's very helpful to understand. I think just being able to find a way to live, you know, and relate to people is to, you know, keep that, you know, it's one of those things that it's just like, if you can just keep that in mind, you know, when you're dealing, whether it's your child, whether it's other people, you know, in general, and just seeing chaos in general in the world, and just, it doesn't make sense to you, like how people think a certain way versus another person. So just to understand that we're all here and we all came here, like you said, like some of us within chaos, some of us within not, you know, being in this brightness, and just trying to figure out how to make it all make sense and do what we need to do, what we came here to do, and to move forward. I think it helps to know that not everybody's on that same level, or that, you know, came in under the same circumstances, clearly. So if we could just figure out how to have patience, I guess.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Melissa, that it gives us some insight for, you know, for me, I mean, I've been working at this a lot, my patience levels, and I feel like I've been getting a lot better with it, but this is good stuff to know too, going into that, because it's like, you have to be patient with everybody because everybody's just on a different level. And
Yeah.
you can't just get frustrated because someone's not seeing it through your own lens. It's because that's my lens. That's how I see it. No one else is probably going to see it that way. So
Yeah.
it helps with the application of patience. I think that's critical.
Yeah. And Carla, when you talked about the twins, I was like, what? Like they could come. I don't know why that like was kind of like a little mind blowing a little bit. Like, whoa, one could come in with an old soul, one could come in with a new soul. What's happening here? They're twins. But you know, it's that same respect. You know how you relate to your siblings. You were raised in the same home, but you all came in under different circumstances.
That was
So
mind blowing for me too, to hear.
yeah.
And it makes me think, did an old soul and a new soul get put into twins by design? Like the old soul to help that new soul kind of move along in a way.
Yeah.
I wondered about that when you
Yeah, I
mentioned
did
that.
too. Yeah, that I was just like, how does that work? And is one supposed to be here to help the other? You know. So yeah.
Well, you know, the Swedes did a study, somewhere in the 1900s, which wasn't that long ago. And then they redid the study. And I don't know exactly how they did it, whether they copied the same design or what. But now I'm talking about IQ. They came out, I don't know how they tested, but they had come out and basically determined that in a family, the firstborn has the highest IQ, and they go down from there. Okay. I'm not saying the study is right or not right or anything like that, but that would answer that question you just had quite well. And actually, it would be something that may be very functional, because the first one's always going to be the leader. And the first one is always going to be giving information to the second one for certain. You know, in fact, I think that's one of the things that they indicate is the first child gets his information from an adult normally, and the second one gets his information from the child, a lot of it from his older sibling, who tells them that purple is yellow. And where mom or dad always told the first one yellow was yellow or purple was purple. But so the second one has a different mindset about reality, if nothing else, and so on and so forth. But that would also follow through. I don't have an answer for it, but and I'm sure that Swedish one is going to be criticized heavily in its study, but they seem to redo it and came with the same conclusion. But whether they did the same pattern again and the pattern was flawed or not, I don't really know. But that in itself has a certain degree of logic and functionality to it, which would mean that the older one may very well transfer some of that ability to become more aware to the second one, you know, and the second to the third or whatever. Because we do know that even when he talked, oh, now I'm really jumping. When he, Spirilla, do you all remember when I mentioned that before?
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, those Spirilla have to be in there. If you're going to collect whatever's on that plane, if you will, and now we're talking, you know, this is a fourth round. We're fourth rounders, so to speak. If we just sit there and go through the level of incarnations we're supposed to, we will just get where we're supposed to be going for the fourth round by the end of the round. Okay. Now, people who are studying this kind of stuff are probably wanting to speed up the process a little bit. They don't want to just sit there and go with the flow. They want to push a little. They want to drive. They want to understand something. And some of those will push, so they are starting to move into what would be the awareness level on the fifth round. And But to get that, those permanent atoms need the little spirilla drilled into that permanent atom. So there's the intake in the same way that we have the intake of our five senses. And that's how we get information basically in to our system, is through those senses. We might think there's a lot of other ways, but it really isn't, because even if somebody bumps into you or runs you down, the way you know is by touch and your coordination to know what up is up and down is down and sideways is sideways and so on and so forth. But that information comes from what comes into us. And he will talk about that there's not that many atoms themselves and the structure for the permanent atom that have five spirilla functioning. Okay, but so if somebody is a fifth rounder who's coming in, they are, in terms of attraction, here we got attraction, they will draw to them any spirilla, any atomic structure, anything with five spirilla, if it's around, and that we shed those. So, and then they talk about, consequently, if a family starts with a couple fifth rounders with the five spirilla and they have kids, it's more likely to compound, and the shedding atomic structures will be there that the child will pick up, because this is all going on too at the same time that we look like we're pretty solid. You know, we've got all this other level of stuff going on. That's part of the importance of getting this information, is you just become more aware. Even in our conversations today, you're now more aware of how things function in unseen worlds that you're not really think about, but it's happening. You know, it's just like the charts. Yeah, I can see that all. It's there, you know, kind of thing. I can pretty much see if people are going to be together or if they're going to just pass each other on the street and never see each other. You know, if somebody brings me a chart where there's no connections, I wouldn't even think that they would see him walking down the street, frankly. They wouldn't even notice that person, you know. And then you see others where they come together, they've got enough connections that when they meet, they never part. Literally, they may never part again, or other than a matter of a few hours to go to work or something, you know, and they're stuck like glue. So all I'm saying is that's all unseen event patterns that are going on that most people are not aware of yet. And as you become more aware of that, then a whole lot of other dynamics can fall into place for you when you look out into the world. And you have more options on how you want to make choices on behavior and how you want to interact.
It's interesting how you say that, because I have one or two friends that we had met like through a common acquaintance, whatever. And I remember, you know, and then we had to meet up. We met up, the two of us met up without that common acquaintance for whatever reason. And I remember just like having lunch and then looking at the person, I'm just like, you and I are going to be like best friends. And she was like, okay. And then we are like, to this day, we are like best friends. It's been like almost 10 years, but it's the same thing. Like you just kind of like, I don't know. I don't know how that happened, but it was just like an automatic, like knowing like, all right, you and I are definitely going to be close friends. And it's not like I made like super effort for that to happen. It was just like, hey, look, just so you know, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
With no information whatsoever than just like an intuitive feeling. So I don't know how that fits into it. And then we kind of are in a lot of the same space. Yeah. Yeah. And we have a lot of like, I feel like a lot of stuff we discuss is like on the same level. So it's almost as if we were able to like connect with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people out there, like you said, like you don't even just, you can walk past a person and just not, just walk past a person. It's nothing. And there's people just like, because we had met like in a larger common group. It was a crochet group, so whatever. But and then you have like those people. You have like that instant, like I think we're gonna be friends,
Right.
and it works
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing too there when you have those friends that are like that, and you might go a decade without talking to each other, and then you reconnect, and it's like there was never even a lapse of time in between the last time you spoke and that point. And for me, that's like a good indicator that there's that connection like we're talking about right here. Because it's like with me and Donnie, we went a decade without talking to each other, and we just randomly reconnected back in October, and it was like we never even skipped a beat.
Yeah, because it's not like because I feel like it's not the day-to-day stuff that connects you, if that makes sense. It's
something
just
deeper.
Yeah. So I don't know if that was when we were talking about earlier, Carla, like the vibrational, I wrote it down, like all your, if that has to do with it, like where you're at and the vibrations that are there, if that's where the connections are, if someone's on that similar vibration. Is that how that works?
Yeah. Well, the way I'm evaluating it is simply I'm matching up mathematical numbers. But in other words, when I say mathematical numbers, I'm looking at a sign and a degree in the sign, of which, there's 12 signs and there's total of 360 degrees in a circle. So out of that, I look, and when I start to see them line up within a degree or so of each other, they each have a planet. That's a connection. That's glue. And consequently, I can also see the ones that you're not going to have harmony with. Okay. But it's all geometry at that point and math. You can take you just abstract it right down to mathematics, and I can turn around and look and see, because I do remember I had I had someone who kept coming to me with this chart. How about this one? I say, no, not that one. There's lots of other people out there, not that one. Don't go with that one. And of course, what happened, she did. And she found out what no, not that one meant. And it was a real tough time for a while there. And so eventually you learn the no, not that one. I mean, if you have somebody who can give you an honest opinion, that maybe no, not that one means no, not that one. There's better matches out there than that one for you. So, and now she doesn't, anything she does, she wants to know what that match is, whether it's for work or whatever, But sometimes you have to learn your lessons hard.
Yeah.
But
do you think, as as I was saying before, do you think at some point we just innately recognize it without knowing it? You know what I mean? Like,
sure,
when you could do it mathematically, but for us,
no, I do, because I'm looking from the outside. In other words, I'm not looking to pair up with them, but somebody's saying, okay, how is this match going to be for this or for that or for whatever the purpose is. But yeah, most people, I mean, let me put it this way, most people ain't talking to me about it, but they're out there pairing up. So I mean, there's intuitive stuff. It's it happens whether I'm around or not, kind of thing. The other important thing is your children. You know, a number of parents will come and they'll figure out who their kids are when they're young. In other words, I'll do their chart. I'm looking at, because it used to be when I was young, there was just an expectation that you were just going to be like your parent. You know, all parents just assumed their kids were going to be like them, and and they're not. And they don't necessarily have the same values or the same purpose for being here or the same interests, you know. And so if you get to understand that about that, your children, then you'll start to see some of it they'll express it, but it can take a lot of pressure off the parent-child relationship if they have an idea who this kid is as they're coming up, because they can help direct them to, you know, and provide opportunities for things that they're going to like. And when some of the child's idiosyncrasies come in that are not in harmony with the parent can let them be who they are and say, oh, okay, well, there's that, she needs that, or this is her preference, or this is something that she's going to demand. So let me make room for that. So that, you know, so that you don't have the battles that we had in the last century, where the child did not want to be following the same footsteps as the parent when it came to whatever they wanted to do for a job or this or that, you know, and a lot of people went down routes they didn't necessarily want to go down. And in today's world, we seem to be able to give children a little more freedom. But on the overall, the big thing that I would say is, if you really understood the dynamics of, everybody's got a chart. None of them are perfect. Never is there going to be one that's perfect. They're not meant to be. This is a planet of evolutionary growth. You're not, like he says in here, the weary pilgrim finally gets to the top. He has no place to rest along the way. Nobody parks in this evolution we've got. You might get a little rest every once in a while somewhere in a lifetime, but there is no permanent place to stop and just say, oh, well, I'm here now and I like it and I'm staying. And I'm not moving off of this space. It doesn't work that way here. It's designed for evolution. So you should be able to develop, if you can see the big picture, a lot of compassion for humanity and everybody who's a human being, because they've got their agenda and they're going to work it, they're going to live it, and it's just the way it is, you know. And there's there used to be a great question about free will. I don't know if anybody even cares about that anymore. You know, but by the same token, this is the personality profile. You do work within it. You have choices. When those transits come along to what you're going to do with the energy and what choices and what growth and development, that's your choice. But you certainly, I think by now, can imagine you can't be somebody else, and somebody else, well, you can't be somebody else. You won't worry about them trying to be you. Because you are who you are, and it's there. That personality is there. And you're not gonna go be totally somebody else in reality. It just isn't gonna, you're not gonna be able to do it any more than when you get a transit. Because I had a young man in class one time and we were talking about a transit that was coming up, and we had a class of like 5 or 6 people. And he's saying, well, you know, we're talking about this, but then maybe I can make that happen when that comes, because I've been thinking about it. And I just said, you're not that powerful. In other words, you know, and very interesting when that transit finally came, he called me or texted me the same day. He said, you're right. And it was such and such. And I saw it and I understood what it was, but it wasn't whatever he would have been able to conjure up in his head, because it's new information, you know. And this whole solar system in our close universe that we have is interacting all the time, and we are part of it. That's the part that's never been brought to light for people. You know, we're still back in Newtonian physics. So, where nothing changes much. We know how it's going to move, and it's not really going to evolve. So, which is not the case at all. And we, you know, we're pretty active. And we're part of something much larger. So, which has a lot of moving parts in it. 7 or 8 billion now, right? Just walking around.
Yeah, well, just everything we discussed, I'm like, oh, there's so many moving parts to everything that
Yeah.
you know, that there's not like, there's never going to be you know, because as you know, as we discuss everything, we move on to like one book and then another book, and you have this person, that person, you're just like, and everything, you know, there is an interconnectedness, but at the same time, it's its own, it's like a Venn diagram, right? Of ourselves. Like there's just so many different things, there's so many different moving parts, so it's hard to explain. And that's why I guess that you can't explain life, because there's so many different moving parts that create it. Does that make sense? You know, when we're talking about
Just
the
relax.
solar
a little bit.
system and like, right, like you said, if you think about 12 signs, 360 degrees, you know, to do the math of however many possibilities of things that can occur to create one life, you know, you can't just sit there and be like, all right, why am I here? You kind of have to, like you said, move forward and go through life and live it to get through the planes. So yeah, I kind of, you know, have a lot to ponder after this week, Carla.
Well, and then once you grasp that, then you might be able to say, well, I'm going to relax through this a little longer, because there's so much stuff going on that there's no way you can try to go out and have a handle on everything. You just let it be and work with things as they come.
Yeah, because I have a long transit coming up soon. So in my head, it's always been, all right, how, you know, how am I going to handle this? But I can't handle it. I have to let it, right?
Yeah.
Is that basically what it is?
Yeah,
let it happen. Don't try to handle it.
Well, you don't even get the first part of the transit is the data dump. In other words, you don't have that information yet until that actual contact is made. Any idea you have, I mean, you can get a ballpark idea of what the part of the world that it's in. We know that. We look at the transit, we can see, you know, what part of your world it might be inclined to fall. But the point is, you don't have the data that it brings when it connects to you to have the real issue, to understand what the real issue is, and the timing for it, for you to interact with it. So, and I learned that from my first teacher, my first astrology teacher, bright woman, and she's sitting here fretting because she's going to have this transit with her moon, and she can't decide if she's going this way or that way, and this way or that way, on and on, you know. And I realized, well, if you can't figure this out in advance,
Did we just lose Carla? I think so.
Just when she had something I wanted to hear.
I know.
So like, wait, don't do that.
Remember, just remember her last word. So when she comes
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. Hopefully she gets back. Yeah, she
Yeah,
froze on
well, her internet or something might have cut out again.
me. Yeah, I know she was having trouble with the number.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was because I have a long trade, like one that's like months long.
Yeah, but like a
About
3-part one coming up. I have one, I think, in the
yeah,
beginning of May.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh, yeah, we lost Carla.
we lost her. Yeah, I have May, I think it's like May to December. So I'm like, there's like fear involved, like, oh
Yeah.
Lord, what's about to happen?
I've got one coming up too. Nothing fear-based though. I'd have to look back.
Yeah,
But
well,
it did,
it's not
but
fear.
it did,
I
it
have
did
control.
indicate I
feel
might be
like
short
have
of money.
control. Yeah. Well, I have like control issues. So part of it's like, all right, and then so much has happened this year for me that I'm like, oh, what else is coming this way?
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta look back at mine and get ready for it because I think it's May 9th or May 5th.
Yeah.
But it stretches through December. And
Yeah.
one thing that pointed out is like I might be short of money. So my wife and I have been really careful what we've been buying lately.
Well, I do have people, when I talk to them the next year, they said, you said I might be a little short of money and we didn't prepare for that, but we should have. So,
Yeah, I have to go back in my notes, Carla, to find out what you told me about this one coming up.
And she just froze up on us again.
She froze again.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's those solar flares.
That's all. Yeah, because it's apparently, and it's funny because I've become a lot more mindful of certain things. Like people don't believe me when I talk about Mercury retrograde.
Mhm.
Like, at first it's a joke, but then when they start recognizing things happening, I'm like, I told you, I told you, I told you.
Yeah.
So I've been following more since going through my chart with Carla. I've just been following more of what's happening that way. So I do know, and the solar flare started the 22nd, I think. But there are, and I would have to look, there are apparently and of course, where I live, there's no clear skies, so I'm not going to see it. There's like 4 planets, I think, that are in alignment
Yeah.
that you would be able to see with the naked eye.
Right. As the
and then
sun's rising in the morning, I think, right?
Yeah. So you have like those 4 planets in alignment. And then there's also solar flares. So this like big energy is being thrown at us.
Yeah. And I thought I saw something that indicated that this solar storm that we're getting right now is one of the biggest ones that they've ever dealt with. Yeah.
And I think that's where some of my fear for my transit is coming, because I'm like, oh wait, all this is happening right when the transit's about to happen. Like how
because
the
entire network's about to go down. That's why.
Yeah.
I lost you again, but anyway.
Yeah.
We were saying it's the solar flares.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're just saying it's this big solar storm coming through. It's affecting everything.
It could be. Well, anyway, but you can't worry too much in advance. It's nice to know that it's coming. Be aware when it starts so that you can see what the issue is, and you have the period of time you have to work on it. Meaning from the beginning to the end, and you've got your midpoint in the middle where once you figured out how you're going to incorporate it, whatever it is, then you implement before the time is up, because when the last date comes, the plug literally gets pulled in terms of that's the amount of time you had to work on that issue. So whatever you accomplish, you take forward as an asset in your life and your life experience. And then it's yours to use going forward, whatever those talents are and everything you develop. That's that part. So, we talked a little bit last time about good, and doing good, kindness and things like that. And then Tom, you had said when you do that, you're looking to do more because it's making you feel good.
And I have been.
Yeah.
I've opened up so yeah, I can just touch on that a little bit if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because right, we did talk about that a little bit before, and I think I mentioned when I go on my daily walks, I try to make an effort, and traditionally I've made an effort to, like, if someone acknowledges me, I'll kind of acknowledge them back, or I'll acknowledge them first and look back. But lately I've been doing it with everybody. Like, so people are like, who's this weirdo that just always says hi to us every morning? But it's kind of strange, because what I noticed when I started, like, trying to project that to the folks that kind of walk by me with their head down and don't even acknowledge me, I just get this weird feeling because they still don't acknowledge me. And it just makes me wonder what's going on in there. I just feel like they need more of this spread of love. But anyway, I'll shut up now because you have something important to tell
No,
us.
Start there first. I mean, because you were indicating that it also makes you feel good.
It does. And I thought about that a lot since I started doing it even more. And I just got thinking about just the compounding effect that can have, because if it makes me feel good to kind of project that to someone, and they're obviously sending something in return because it's making me feel good that I did it. But then they're going off and doing that to people. And then it just kind of has like a snowball effect, like just spreading joy and love and all that good stuff.
Well,
So,
remember we had the question last week, where does good reside on the chart? And
yes.
it was what was the answer was, it's up above wherever you are, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So if you're, I mean, not that you're not living in some of the good also, but what I'm saying is, you can, when you reach in and because good is within you. Okay. So when you bring it out now to dispense it, if you will, it has to come through you.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's a good, I mean, that's part of what you're left with, is a good feeling, because that energy's come through you and you've passed it on, and that other individual feels it. But that's always going to be energy that you're reaching in and getting, and all of the, on that chart, the good is there. And I'm trying to find I think it's esoteric healing. Let's do this one. This is one of my favorite laws that he's got in here. And I don't read all of this book by any stretch of the imagination. He's talking about, in this case, this is esoteric healing, and it's a book on healing. Disease is a product of the subject of three influences. One, a man's past, wherein he pays the price of ancient error. That, I suppose, is translated to karma. Second, his inheritance, wherein he shares with all mankind those tainted streams of energy, which are group origin. And we have certain basic illnesses even still. And he talks elsewhere in this book about, there's a lot of that illnesses and stuff that are in the dirt. In fact, he talks about preference for cremation, just simply because a lot of those, you get rid of those illnesses there, where a lot of them have been put in the earth because everybody was buried. They got sick and they died, and whatever went down there with them, and still in the soil. So when I'm talking about group origin, it's group origin. And then he shares with all natural forms that which the Lord of life imposes on his body. In other words, that's the demands of, just like our form and our structure. And we are this way because that is the design. So for this planet and this planet's, the body we're in. Okay, so I'm sure there's more details to all that, but that's a simple, fast one. These three influences are called the ancient law of evil sharing. Okay. This must give place someday to the new law of ancient dominating good, which lies behind all that God has made. This law must be brought into activity by the spiritual will of man. So when I look at this one, I just love that law because you can transfer over to the ancient law of dominating good. So when you pull out, you know, when you go within yourself and pull out that activity that brings that good out there, like I said, first of all, it has to come through you. Then it gets transferred to whomever you're being kind to. And it won't stop there, because this energy generally has a pretty powerful energy. You know, we talk about forces and then we talk about energy. And spiritual will is got energy. It's a direct force, or not a direct force, but direct source. And so it's spreading good, if you will, but that good makes for healthy planet. And then, because ultimately this particular chapter is talking about the let's see if I can find out where he noted that the distribution of that ultimately will get rid of disease, if you will. It won't be tomorrow, but every little bit helps. First of all, it makes the individual healthier. And because you're bringing in that energy that is good into your own system. I'm not going to have all of these notes here of where everything was, but the bottom line is when you are not, when the energy is not flowing through you, you know, things get blocked up. Health has more problems. We're meant to interact. Let me see if I've got a few notes here on all this stuff. Yeah, I have notes. We create this world with our every move. We build and we create the consciousness that defines the world we live in, individually and collectively. So when you reach up and draw down the energy of good and dispense it into the moment, you know, that you, and be it through a kindness, it's a touch of the heart. And that's what's meant to happen on this planet, is a communication of heart to heart, if you will. So inclusiveness, that is inclusiveness. That is a natural creating in the world of good. And it's naturally meant to be. That's the way we're meant to be, is to have those levels of interaction and not have them obstructed. That is the growth and development designed for this planet. That is the creation of consciousness. That is the union of spirit and matter. And I also have notes that little bit of goodness that you pass on to someone else, then will just keep moving, because it's got more energy of a constructive nature than whatever energy you had the moment before you drew that out and passed it along. So, and that's really meant to be our way of everyday existence on this planet. We're in a realm right now where there's great efforts to obstruct that and to not have it. But this is what is meant to occur here for a healthy planet.
Well, I'm not
because
stopping.
yeah, no, but
Feels too good to stop.
yeah,
It's
and
addictive.
yeah, and people need to know that I mean, that is important, and it's real. It's and the benefits from it are real.
Well, I will say, since I've been really focusing on that and working on that and doing that more, that from a health perspective, I do feel a lot better. My allergies don't bother me as much as they used to. Not getting sick as much as I used to. So I'm a firm believer it does make a difference. You mentioned that energy just keeps on going, and so I think that's what I think that's kind of aligned with the contemplation I had over the past week about that, how I spoke about the compounding effect. Like if I'm spreading it, that energy keeps moving. So I just feel like that once someone else receives it, it's like, okay, it's in with them now. Now they're going to push it out to someone else, and that person's going to take it and push it out. And it just kind of keeps growing and growing. And the hope is that it just spreads like wildfire, which it sounds like it does, because that energy keeps on moving. It's like a freight train. It ain't stopping.
Yeah, and they may not deliberately say, well, somebody did something nice for me, so I'm going to do something nice for somebody else, but
Right.
it will slip out in their expression, just, without them consciously necessarily
Sure.
thinking about it,
Sure.
because it had a nice impact on them, which so then they have a nice impact on somebody else.
Right.
It's just the natural.
Yeah. It's really neat.
I think where this talks about the final sentence in this second law gives basic indication of the time period. The law of dominating good will be brought into activity by the spiritual will of man. It says, what does this mean? It means that only when the truly large numbers of men are controlled by the spiritual triad, having built the anakarana, therefore use spiritual will, can disease be stamped out and only good control. It will, of course, be gradual process, and in the early stages, almost imperceptible. Again, why is this? Because evil, crime, and disease are the result of the great heresy of separativeness, and because hate and not love controls. So that's why he's saying it might be almost imperceptible initially, because there's a whole lot of other stuff going on that's got that holds sway right now. But this is the way it's going to change, and it is meant. It says, let me see, as yet the sense of universality and of identity with all is not to be found except in advanced initiates and disciples and mass consciousness, and the demonstration of the herd instinct must not be confounded with the sense of oneness, which marks the rightly oriented person. The New Age teaching Anantha Anakarana, the constitution of man, principally from the angle of the three periodical bodies and not so much from that of the lower fold man, will be emphasized, and particularly in the higher schools of learning, thereby laying a sound foundation for the esoteric schools to be slowly emerging. The nature of spiritual will be taught in contradistinction to that of the selfish personal will. By its means, tremendous new potencies will be released and safely released upon daily life. So anyway, but what you're feeling, what I wanted to point out was what you're feeling is real, and it is, and that is the product you get out of that being open and interacting. I mean, there's your inclusiveness.
Mhm.
That's the natural inclusiveness, because we're all one in many respects. Even though we're individuals, we're still humanity. There shouldn't be any reason why we can't identify each other and recognize each other and give some respect back and forth. And like I said, when you're kind like that, it's a touch of the heart that touches the other heart.
Mhm.
And it is, the heart is ultimately in this system, where that second solar system is, that's where the most definition, I'm not saying this right, but that's where the focus is.
Mhm.
This is the system of love, and it is the heart that represents that. And even when you get in initiations, human and solar, or not in raisin initiations, the other one is the earlier book, this is the more advanced book. When you get high up on those planes of initiation, one of the highest ones that we deal with, probably the highest one in the system before we start figuring out how to get out of here, is deals with the heart chakra. So I mean, if this planet wants to get healthy, they can be kind to each other. And it goes a long way.
So Carla, for some of this, it is it can be a collective thing. You know, like when you see things, sorry, when you see things like going on in the world, but then you see like almost a collective consciousness happening. Is that what it means as we're moving into this new, as we're moving into the new age, you know, and you're saying the heart chakra, is it more people are feeling that, more people are experiencing that at the same time? Is that how that works? Or no? Okay.
No, what I'm saying is when he makes contact with somebody to say hi, for example, and he's giving them recognition, that's a one-to-one. But there's something happening here in terms of the recognition. When you actually, if you want to go abstract it to consciousness, where Annie Besant was saying, you lend your existence to, how exactly, let me see how she exactly says it, because I'm not going to get it right. Yeah, where everything is separable, first of all, in this world of consciousness, to the I and the not I. That's a big I, not an eyeball. The self and the not self. Everything is summed up under one of the two headings. It's either self or not self. This is the individual. This is how we work. And it's how consciousness works. There is nothing which cannot be placed under one of them. Self is life. And now with life, you get that dynamic energy. Consciousness and not self is matter and form. Here then we have a duality, but the twain are not two separate things, isolated and unrelated. There's a continual relation between them, a continual approach and withdrawal, an identification and a repudiation. This interplay shows itself in an ever-changing universe. And in that regard, she talks about, so I mean, in other words, the approach and the withdrawal occurs when he's walking down the street and sees somebody on his walk. That's where you're seeing him, right, Mike? Okay. The approach, he recognizes, gives recognition, says hi. And so that's him reaching out, literally, with the heart, if you will, with energy that's really reaching out. So she talks about the universal self, the inner self, thinking of the not self, identifies himself with it. And that's really here, thereby sharing with it his being. So what he's really saying is that in that interaction, for Tom, is sharing his being by reaching out and recognizing that which is not him, which is the other guy. And he's lending the other guy existence by recognizing him. Because he could walk by him as non-existent. He refuses to recognize him. He refuses to be inclusive, if you will.
Okay.
And so the divine activity is sharing his being with that person by recognizing him, interacting, giving him existence in that passing moment. But there's a special energy that gets exchanged there in that, because he's got it, and the movement he's doing is recognized as a movement of kindness or a movement of good. So he's pulling down that energy, that spiritual will, that spirit, which really has energy. There's other, we function for the most part in the lower dimensions on forces. You know, we have to transfer something into, like, eat something, we change it into the energy that runs our body, but it's forces. We've taken vegetables and minerals and protein and whatever, converted it into forces that will run this body. And if you don't keep feeding it, it isn't going to last. Where energy is perpetual, that, you know, I mean, look at the universe. It's run on energy for the most part. And so we see it in terms of eons of life, but it doesn't have to be going and eating up and having 3 meals a day to sustain itself. So where it had to convert to force. When you get up into the spiritual triad, you're dealing with direct energy that flows. That's why you don't need the soul anymore, because now you can run on your own juice, if you will. Because you're connected up on the middle part here now, that spiritual triad. So, but just the fact that because he has to lend and share his being with that party that he's identifying with and give him recognition. That's what all this is when you interact with people. Does that make sense, Melissa?
Yes.
Okay. And so that, I mean, that's dynamic, that's constructive. That's the way this planet was meant to. And so when you look back at, we were talking about earlier about that monad on the first level, when it just gets that little film around it, so that it's now got the materials that it's going to utilize in captive form for, and its substance, they call it. And but the film is so fine that it doesn't obstruct interacting with anything out beyond it. That's ultimately the way it's supposed to be when you've arrived, or this whole system develops, is it will all be able to interact. The obstruction of interacting is not constructive to anybody's growth and development on this planet. And probably a lot of the hurt and the anger that turns into unconstructive behavior comes from not being involved. Somebody not recognizing you young. You know, not getting, in other words, not getting the love. Not getting included, being excluded at early ages and tossed out of here, there, or wherever else. So they go somewhere they go over in that direction. It's not constructive, but they're part of that group because that group will include them. You know, that's another level of fundamental interaction that we probably don't get a lot of education about. Probably the church was the only one who made some points on that somewhere in the background. But they're having a hard time doing that now too. Yeah. So I've been all over the place today. I don't know if you can tie some of that together information wise. Everybody's just sitting thinking.
Right now I'm pondering, yeah.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I feel there's a lot that yeah, that makes you ponder.
You know,
There's
he's
just a lot
got
to it, yeah.
somewhere in his books, a lot of his books, he'll write something and he'll say, ponder on this. I don't know if you've run into that yet, but earlier in earlier books, if nothing else, he would always say, ponder on this and, you know, give it some thought. But if you do, then really you're sending an order into your consciousness to go give me some more information about that, which is constructive.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the way that one works too.
Right. Yeah, because it'll put me into, I call it like going down the rabbit hole. Like if there's a thought that, right, like there's a thought, and then I start doing a deep dive, looking for more information and trying to find things and make sense of whatever it is that's quite, you know, I do that with Pinterest too. So if I have a thought or an idea for something creatively, then you start going down this rabbit hole of ideas and information and how you can put it together and make it make sense. So a lot of what we talked about today, I think, is going to put me in that space.
Yeah.
Where I'll just start looking and diving and deconstructing, you know, and make sense of it all.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to see, I got some other notes, but I think they're not, they probably shouldn't go in that direction today. Yeah, every once in a while I pull up something out of the physics of can't find it. The physics of consciousness, and this one has such zingers in it that are real. I mean, it's science, but he's able to put it into to words that really make us wonder about our reality. Because the way that it actually works out there, because he comes to the conclusion, I mean, the basic fundamentals of what Annie Besant is saying and what all this is, and he put this book together in 2000. He's a physics professor, but he'd had his epiphany also. It just took him 40 years to be able to put it into words that were understandable. But, you know, and like cosmic consciousness, like he says, most of what we teach are by people who have had those epiphanies or those initiations that bring that information to them, and they can figure out a way to get it into words and communicate it. And that, for the most part, that's what we've been teaching. Those are the people we use their ideas to teach. the basic fundamentals that we teach come from people who've had those openings up, if you will, of seeing a little better way something is put together in the universe, and then figuring out how to explain it to everybody else. So yeah, hopefully this opened a little door or two here.
That's putting it lightly. Oh, I think it has. I think it's opened a few doors.
Yeah.
I know my desired book buying list continues to grow every time we have one of these discussions. So one of these days I already know I'm gonna be looking at was it the initiation and raise, or 7 and raise, or something?
Oh,
Raise and initiations. Raise and initiations and esoteric healing are on my to buy list.
Okay, well, do the raise and initiations first, because you asked me a couple of questions about that earlier,
Right.
and that would be where you would find that information. The
Yeah.
challenge of the esoteric healing book is quite a challenge. I mean, I'm not suggesting not to get it, but you can, if you really need to look at something in it, you can go download it.
Right. I've seen it on the Lucis Trust website.
Yes, yeah. And that's where, that to me would be the safe place to download something. Other people have the book a download, but you don't know for sure if they're downloading something else with it that you're not aware of, where I
Right.
think Lucis Trust should be a safe place to download a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of those are download for free. So for anybody who's ever watches this, they can get all of the Bailey books from Lucis Trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they do it nicely there too. So you can just pinpoint on certain chapters and sections that you might want to just direct your attention to kind of focus on the topic that you're thinking about at that point in time. So that's kind of neat. You don't have to like scroll through hundreds of pages to find what you're looking for. You can just tune in to specific sections if you need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Esoteric Healing is a book for healers on one level. It's also got incredible information. I have never had it because I want to be a healer. I don't think that's me. But there's a lot of good information of understanding, again, how all the pieces fit. I mean, after today, you guys have more variables to think about.
Right.
In terms of your everyday maneuvering kind of thing that you have that now to factor in if you see such and such or this or that, or you may understand or see that, well, I'm not seeing this, but the odds are this realm deals with such and such, and yeah, and I mean that it's the difference between running with a lot of all of that available to you to process with and more dense.
I'm trying to be less dense, so.
Right, yeah. More inclusive.
That's the path I'm on, right? The inclusive, less dense path.
Yeah, well, that term dense has been a joke going, hasn't it, now for a few weeks?
Yes, for a couple weeks then.
Yeah. It's not meant to be pejorative. It's just got picked up for humor, I guess, at this point.
I guess it's the more relevant reference to where dense matter, I think, is what it's getting at there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, but being able, yeah, and of course, as you go up that chart, things are less dense, obviously, and after the lower 3 dense is gone, but there's still matter, but it's a much more refined matter on the spiritual triad and up in that realm. But and so much more is apparent. Or another way to put it is because you're not running around with all this information cognizant in your head all at one time, or you would really be wacko. But you have the ability to get to where the information is. In other words, and draw that to you very quickly by the same, you got the self and the not self, and you bring them together, or you've got, you're interested in this, and once you do, then all this other information will come to you that's related to it. That just becomes automatic. It's the way we work. So it's just a matter of how fast the equipment works. How fast does it be translated from point A to point B and then back. And I say that this is really, I mean, I was on the beach one day down here in where I am, and I was much further down the beach, and there was a little, I imagine it was a pit bull, but it was kind of small, but it had a muzzle on, so they obviously knew it was rather aggressive. And I was just walking by the beach, and this pit bull comes over, and it tries to jump up and would have hit my back buttocks, I suppose, because that's really what they go for. I think to down an animal, they go in the back, and they try to pull that down. Well, I mean, I was just mad at the dog because there was no reason. I wasn't on this dog's property, et cetera, et cetera. And I turned around and I said something to the effect that he should not be doing this, blah, 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 whatever it was. Okay, it was just, and let it go. And it was about 3 weeks later, and into my mind comes the response. This is what I've been trained to do. What do you expect me to do? Kind of thing. You got to understand that I have been trained as an animal to do this, was the dog's response back to me. The only point, and I don't interact on that level with animals all the time. There's animal whisperers and dog whisperers and horse whisperers and whatever. I'm not one of those. So please don't think that. But I had just been so pissed off at this dog that I had turned around and made a very direct statement. But the point that I'm making is it took 3 weeks for the translation to go from here to there to back to me. Somebody else, you have an instantaneous awareness of where there's not the obstruction. So it depends how much time it takes to go get information back. It's, again, I can repeat again. We read these books, and a week later we look at the same books and say, I don't remember reading that. That wasn't what that said, kind of thing. Because now we have a very larger viewpoint of what that said. And it's in our consciousness now. And so in fact, one of the things I think, if I'm going to say this exactly right, is in this Physics of Consciousness, he says, as I am writing these words, meaning when he's writing these words for this book, they are in your consciousness. And that was before the book was printed. But as he was writing, he was making a point about how this consciousness is all one for everybody. It's all there. It's just, and so when DK talks about the new science will be, or the new religion, I don't know which he says, will be invocation, evocation. In other words, you invoke what it is you're wanting and it comes back. So when you read this material, that is your invocation. And the evocation is then the matching piece comes back. with more information, if you will. But I don't think he stretches that to, okay, well, I would like to have a Tesla. So, hey, I want a Tesla, and expect a Tesla to come back. He's not talking about that for materialistic things. You know, he's working on the mental plane and above.
Mhm. Makes sense. It's like you have the implication, the intake of the material, and then you might have the aha moment a week or two later as you've been pondering it over that time. Like that's the message coming back. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, it's just like reading this material and then a week later reading it again and realizing that you see something totally different in it,
Right.
because now you have much more information around it. But the ponder, I'm going to go to Chardine for a minute.
Okay.
Teilhard, when you talked about it, you ponder on it and ponder on it. Okay. Like he made the point. He says you can work on something and try to work on it. You can't get it. And then, so you finally just let it go because you can't figure it out. And then it's not very long, and here comes the answer.
Hmm.
So don't ponder so long after this, and you'll get what you need figured out quicker.
Okay. So Melissa, we just need to be comfortable in our nothingness when we're
Yes.
pondering.
Like, it's like when we're pondering, don't search, let it come to you.
But it makes
Like,
sense because
yeah,
you know,
sense.
it's
No,
like
total sense.
it's like my boss when he tells me, he's like, you're thinking about it too much. You're thinking too deep into this. It's just this. So it really, this is just like, it relates to everything. Don't want to think too
Exactly.
much. Think just
Yeah.
enough and then let it
Yeah.
come.
But
I know,
kind
but
of
we
what
hear,
Yeah.
but we hear it, like we hear that all the time. Sometimes I feel like I've heard that over and over again. Where it's just like you're trying too hard. You know, like sometimes the answer is simple and you're just looking at it, looking for some big, crazy answer when maybe the answer may be so simple, and you just got to like stop for a moment, take a breath, and then it's like, oh, there it is. You know,
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
I'll simplify it. When you put it in the order, send it off and don't keep calling it back. Because it's got to go to get whatever it is you ordered to bring back to you. So if you keep, that's why if you can do that and just kind of send it off or not think about it. And I'm pretty sure once you read this book, or we read it, you don't think about the words in this book for every day for the next week. You don't think about them at all. That's why when you come back, there's more to it. But if you are thinking about something and you keep bringing that thought pattern back into your mind, you have not let it go to get its objective to bring back to you. So, yeah, the order can't be fulfilled because you never let it out of your aura long enough to go get what you're looking for, or the information or the answer or whatever it is. You gotta, yeah. Just like when you sit down to read, if you haven't been doing a lot of reading or something like that, and all of a sudden your head fills with all this other stuff that you start to think about, oh, I got to do this and that and so on. All that is these are all the ideas and stuff that you have not resolved, that are sitting within your aura that you haven't let out, and that you also haven't let into your conscious mind prior to sitting down and relaxing and starting to read something. And then all these things, it's like kids. Hey, me, you know, in other words, it crowds in. That lets you know it's hanging out there, that's just blocking up the airwaves.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we explain that to our bosses when they're making us deal with the deadline? And I can't just tell them, well, that thought hasn't come to me yet. Give me another week or so and let's talk.
But didn't you? Oh, don't you just say, oh, I thought you put that on hold.
Sometimes I have done that.
Oh, you could, well, you might as well accuse him of putting it on hold.
Oh, you wanted that this week?
Right. I thought that was next month. Well, how about just my dog ate the homework?
There you go.
Try that again.
Give it a shot. My
Yeah,
kids
the
ate
dog.
it.
Yeah, right. Oh, no, they just erased it when they wanted to play their game,
Yeah.
their video game. They accidentally erased all that work, right?
My daughter spilled her milk on it.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, life is what we make it. So the more we know about it, the more either simple it can get. It actually does, by the way. I mean, that's one of the things that I think for these guys who have these little epiphanies with cosmic consciousness and stuff will say, you know, that life simplifies. And in fact, what I think was a very good example was Doris Lessing. You guys probably haven't, I haven't probably mentioned her to you. Woman writer, was top woman writer in the world for a long time till she wrote some books on some spirituality. And then they were mad at her because they thought she abandoned the women's movement. Anyway, she wrote a book called Golden Notebook. And I think it was like 1969 or something. I'm not sure. Nothing you should read. Okay.
Okay.
I believe it's explained to me there was a woman who was having a breakdown. All right. And I guess, I don't remember the book well enough, but she had different notebooks and I think they were for different sections of her life. Anyway, it was very complicated to read. Most everybody who would read it during that period of time found her writing difficult to read. Okay. And she went through, I'm sure, one of these levels of initiation. I don't know which one, but all I know is when that was done, her writing was the most simple, beautiful thing there ever has been since. And in 1980s, I think, and so she would have written them earlier. She got, and she's a very prolific writer. She's got tons of books that she wrote. She felt invaded by these ideas of what she called her space fiction or whatever. And wrote some books that are from, they're chronicles or records or notes from people on Canopus. Do you know that star? It's in the Grand Cross, and she grew up in South Africa. So they had the Grand Cross there, and Canopus is the strongest, I think, the most largest of them. And of course, you know, Sirius, that's more commonly spoke of. So she wrote a book with the chronicles of people who were sent here from Canopus to this planet, and talked about the helping people grow here and trying to learn things. And we had a bad fix on this planet, and it had gone a little haywire, I guess. There'd been some shift in the lock or whatever was, and we're out on the outer edges and we don't get all the energy we should, and we're slow growing and trying to figure out. And then the north half is Canopus, the south half is Sirius for development. So it's a 5-book series, but 2 or 3 of them are records really of what's going on here on supposedly on this planet. But anyway, I would I would be inclined to tag the complications of her writing before that, the simplification after some event pattern happened, because it was like day and night. And she's just an astounding writer of capturing human behavior. And then coming up on taking an absolute left turn on what she was writing about, just popped in. Like she said, she was invaded with the ideas, and here they are. And she wrote these 5 books. The women's movement hated her for it because they thought she abandoned them, and so on and so forth. I think she was very well connected, and I think she, somewhere along the line, she had her epiphany, if you will, or some major event pattern here happened. That's when life got simpler. And then she's also got more levels of awareness now that she's connecting with. In fact, Bull is the one who's read those. They were heart-wrenching for me to read when I read them in the 80s. It took me a long time. It was a tough one because she talks about us from the viewpoint of somebody from an advanced culture coming here, looking at us. So, so if you ever need a break from this stuff, and you want to really go get immersed in reality of this planet and us and so on and so forth. And then a couple of other interesting ones mixed in there. Although the Bull read the second one, which was the marriages of zones 3, 4, and 5. And afterwards said something about, well, that didn't have anything to do with spirituality. I said, did you look at the title? Okay. You know where the 3, 4, and 5 is on the chart, don't you?
3, 4, and 5 are the,
Yeah.
It's that,
Spiritual triad.
the spiritual triad. Yeah. You know what? We
Yeah.
haven't even shown that chart at all today, now that I think about it.
No,
This one
but-
right here.
but in other
Right in
words,
here,
the title
right?
the titles she gave this book were the marriages between the zones 3, 4, and 5.
4 and 5.
Okay. And that's what the book really was about, but in the form of a marriage and then one other marriage. The marriage between 3 and 4, and then the marriage between 4 and 5.
Mhm.
And he read the whole thing and missed that totally, until he said to me, oh, well, that didn't have anything to do with that other stuff. And I said, well, look at the title, look at your chart. So if you ever need a real break for something more in the fiction line, it's Doris Lessing, and it is it's got a long title, but the archives of Shikasta. Shikasta starts out the title. Unfortunately, there wasn't a big draw for the book, and so they put all 5 of them in one paperback, which you do not want. So best to find some good used books of those copies where they were still in single copies, because holding a paperback that's that thick and fat is no fun to read.
Mhm.
So anyway. So. Oh, Melissa, did you ever look any more at Teilhard Chardin's writings?
He's in my he's in my Amazon cart.
Okay. Well, the point is for you with your background and dealing with transitions, that some of that material should be really good.
Okay, awesome.
Because he lived some of that I've read of his, and that was the science one, and I don't know what the name of that was, and it was not a popular one, but somebody put a lot of his lectures under one cover. But I would pick it up and it was like reading DK. Sometimes I thought, oh, well, this is in the same place. Except now with his background and yours in Catholicism, it worked for him. It didn't work for the church, but it worked for him. They wouldn't allow that to be published. Eventually, after he did come back from China, at some point, some people did make an effort to get some of his writings out and being published. And
yeah, there's a lot of books by other people. This one is The Cosmic Vision of Teilhard de Chardin. There's another one like The Life and Vision, but you're saying like go directly to his stuff, right?
yes, yeah, something he wrote. Yeah, get a hold of something he wrote.
Okay.
His words. It's just like with the Bailey material. What's really important here are these words.
Yeah, because I have the one I have in my cart is his writings, Modern Spiritual Master Series. Is that the one? Maybe.
I don't know. Because I got stuff that was maybe even earlier, and I think like I found one of them in the UCSD library, and and those probably were not very popular. So anyway,
well,
but and finishing up on this, the words that DK uses here, those are the key words, is reading this stuff just the way it was written. That's its own magic. So are we at the time?
Yeah.
At 12:04, we've been going for 3 hours.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
marathoners now.
I guess so. Donnie, you can stay in wherever you are, right?
No, he's been off for a little while.
He dropped off a while ago.
No, I didn't mean it that way. I mean, he can
Oh.
stay there now because you got it wired here.
Yeah, right.
That's what I meant by that.
So can we stop recording now, you think, or
Sure.
we're good?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go make my daughter lunch now. So.
Okay.
All right,
Good morning.
thank you. I'll see you guys next